Close your eyes and listen. Let the room around you grow quiet. Tonight, I have a story for you. And when it is over, you may not feel quite so alone in the dark. The corner, behind the refrigerator. I first noticed the sound because my apartment was unusually quiet. It was a little after 2 in the morning. I had gone into the kitchen for a glass of water, and the refrigerator had stopped humming at the exact moment I entered. Most refrigerators do that. They run for a while, then settle into silence. You rarely notice until you are standing close to one in the dark. I remember the floor felt cold under my feet. The only light came from the small green clock on the microwave. I could smell dish soap and the onions I had cut for dinner. Then I heard 3 soft taps. They came from the corner behind the refrigerator. Tap, tap, tap. I waited, holding my empty glass. Nothing happened. The building was old, so noises were normal. Pipes clicked inside the walls. The upstairs neighbor walked around late at night. Sometimes the elevator groaned, even when nobody was using it. I filled my glass and went back to bed. The next night, I heard the taps again. It was 2:13 in the morning. I know the exact time because I checked the microwave clock. 3 taps. A pause. A pause. Then one more. It was not loud. It sounded almost polite, like someone tapping a fingernail against the other side of a door. I assumed it was a pipe cooling down. That explanation made sense until I noticed there were no pipes in that wall. My kitchen shared one wall with the hallway and another with my living room. The sink and dishwasher were on the opposite side. As far as I knew, there was nothing behind the refrigerator except plaster and the apartment next door. My neighbor was a woman named Claire. We had spoken perhaps 6 times in 2 years. She worked from home and received a lot of deliveries. I knew this because the drivers often left her food outside my door by mistake. The next time I saw her, I asked if she had been moving furniture late at night. She gave me an embarrassed smile. "Is it the chair?" she asked. I said I was not sure. My desk chair rolls when I stand up. I'd been meaning to get a rug. I told her it was probably that. It was easier than describing the tapping. That night, I stayed awake to listen. At 2:12, the refrigerator was humming. At 2:13, it stopped. The apartment became still. 3 taps came from the corner, then one more. I stood in the kitchen doorway. I did not turn on the light. After a few seconds, I tapped the wall with my knuckle. 3 times. I felt foolish as soon as I did it. Nothing answered. I went back to bed. In the morning, there was a thin layer of gray dust on the floor beside the refrigerator. It looked like the dust that gathers under furniture, soft and fibrous, mixed with hair. That was strange because I cleaned that part of the kitchen every weekend. I wiped it up with a damp paper towel. The dust smelled faintly of wet concrete. Under it, I found a black line where the floor met the wall. At first, I thought it was mold. When I bent down, I saw that it was a gap. It was no wider than the edge of a coin. It ran from behind the refrigerator to the baseboard beneath the window. I pressed my fingertip against it. Cold air touched my skin, not a draft. A steady current. The air smelled like rainwater in a basement. I called the building manager. His name was Martin, and he always sounded tired, even in person. He came up that afternoon with a flashlight and a small toolbox. Together, we pulled the refrigerator away from the wall. The floor underneath was clean except for the gray dust. The gap continued along the baseboard and disappeared behind the cabinets. Martin crouched and shone his flashlight into it. He stayed that way for longer than I expected. "Is there a leak?" I asked. He moved the flashlight slowly from side to side. "No." "What is it?" He stood and rubbed his knees. "Old buildings shift." He said this with the practiced certainty of someone who had used the sentence many times. He filled the gap with white caulk. Then he pushed the refrigerator back and told me to call if I smelled gas or saw water. For 3 nights, there was no tapping. On the 4th night, I woke at 2:13. The sound was different. It was a slow scratching now. Not an animal scratching to get through. It was softer than that. More like a pencil moving across rough paper. I lay in bed and listened. The scratching lasted almost a minute. Then I heard my refrigerator start humming again. The next morning, the cork was still in place. It looked dry and clean. But the refrigerator had moved, only slightly, maybe half an inch. The front feet no longer lined up with the pale marks they had left on the floor. I blamed the motor. I told myself the vibration had made it shift. That evening, I placed 2 folded pieces of cardboard under the front feet. I drew lines around them with a pen. Before bed, I checked them twice. At 2:13, the scratching started. I did not get up. In the morning, the cardboard was exactly where I had left it. The refrigerator was still inside the lines, but the corner behind it looked farther away. I know how that sounds. The refrigerator was the same size. The kitchen was the same size. Yet the dark strip between the appliance and the wall seemed deeper than it should have been. I took a photograph with my phone. In the picture, the corner looked normal. I measured the space with a tape measure. It was 3 inches wide at the front. I slid the metal tape into the gap. It went in 3 inches, then 6, then 12. The refrigerator stood less than 4 inches from the wall. I stopped pushing when the tape reached 23 inches. The metal felt very cold when I pulled it back. Tiny drops of water covered the end. They smelled salty. I called Martin again. This time he did not come upstairs. He asked whether I had moved the refrigerator since his visit. I said no. There was a long pause. Then he asked, "Have you answered it?" I thought I had misheard him. Answered what? The noise. I remembered tapping on the wall. I told him I had done it once. He breathed out slowly. "You shouldn't do that." His voice was quieter now. The tiredness had gone from it. I asked him what was behind my kitchen wall. "Claire's apartment," he said. Then he hung up. I knocked on Claire's door after work. She opened it only a few inches. Her apartment smelled like coffee and warm laundry. I asked if I could see her kitchen. She stared at me through the gap. "Why?" I told her about the refrigerator. I expected her to laugh or close the door. Instead, she looked over her shoulder. "I don't have one," she said. "A refrigerator? A kitchen." We stood there in silence. The apartments on our floor had identical layouts. At least, I had always assumed they did. Claire let me inside. Her living room shared a wall with my kitchen. A narrow hallway led to her bedroom and bathroom. There was no kitchen. She had a microwave on a small table. Beside it was a kettle and a compact refrigerator. I asked where the kitchen had been. She pointed to the wall. Maintenance closed it before I moved in. They said there was water damage. The wall was painted the same pale color as the rest of the apartment. A bookshelf stood against it. Something about the bookshelf bothered me. It leaned forward very slightly, as if the floor behind it sloped downward. Near the baseboard I saw grey dust. Claire saw me looking. "It comes back every morning," she said. That was when we heard the tapping. It came from behind her bookshelf. 3 taps. A pause. Then one more. Claire did not move. I felt the sound through the floor. A small vibration passed into the soles of my shoes. Then, from the other side of the wall, inside my empty apartment, something tapped 3 times in reply. Claire asked me to leave. I spent that night at a hotel. The room was clean and smelled strongly of air freshener. I left the bathroom light on and kept the television playing at low volume. At 2:13, I woke to complete silence. The television screen had frozen. On it was the paused image of a dark room. It took me several seconds to realize it was not part of the program. It looked like my kitchen. The angle was low, close to the floor. I could see the refrigerator from behind. There was more space back there than there should have been. The wall was not visible. Beyond the refrigerator was a long, dim floor covered in grey dust. It stretched away until the picture became black. Something in that darkness made a quiet scratching sound. Then the television returned to normal. The next morning I went home. Claire's door was open. Her apartment was empty. Not recently empty. Completely empty. There was no bookshelf. No compact refrigerator. No table. The room smelled of fresh paint. Martin was standing in the hallway. He would not look at me. He said nobody named Claire had ever lived there. I showed him the delivery messages on my phone. Every order that had been left at my door was still in the app. The customer name on all of them had changed to mine. I moved out that week. I found a newer building with bright hallways and quiet elevators. My new kitchen is small, but there are no gaps along the floor. The refrigerator fits tightly between two cabinets. For a while, I slept well. Then, last night, I woke thirsty. I went into the kitchen. The floor was cold under my feet. The microwave clock read 2:13. The refrigerator stopped humming. I waited. Nothing tapped. I almost laughed. Then I noticed a narrow space between the refrigerator and the cabinet. I had never seen it before. At the bottom of that space was a folded piece of cardboard with a blue pen line across it. It was the cardboard I had placed beneath the old refrigerator. I did not touch it. As I stood there, cold air moved across my feet. It carried the smell of wet concrete and salt. From somewhere far behind the refrigerator, Claire calmly said my name. Then she whispered that the apartments do not stand beside each other. They stand around something. And a moment later, from the dark corner behind me, my own voice answered her. The corner that wasn't on the floor plan. I started measuring my hallway because I wanted to buy a bookcase. That is the ordinary truth of it. My apartment had almost no storage. Books were stacked beside the couch, under the coffee table, and along one wall of my bedroom. Every time I vacuumed, I had to move them in small, dusty towers. There was an empty section of wall at the end of the hallway. It seemed like the perfect place for a narrow shelf. The hallway itself was simple. The front door was at one end, the bedroom was at the other. Between them were the bathroom, a small closet, and the doorway to the living room. The walls were painted a tired shade of white. At night, they looked gray. I measured the empty section before work one morning. 37 inches. I wrote the number in my phone. Then I put on my coat, checked that the stove was off, and left for the train. My commute was about 40 minutes. I usually spent it half awake, holding a paper cup of coffee and listening to the wheels scrape against the rails. Most mornings, the same people stood near me. A man with a folding bicycle. A woman who carried a canvas grocery bag. Two students who spoke quietly while looking at the same phone. Nothing about that morning felt unusual. After work, I stopped at a furniture store. The bookcase I liked was 36 inches wide. It came in a flat box and looked light enough to carry home. Still, I decided to measure the hallway again. I am careful about things like that. When I got home, the apartment was cold. The heat had not come on yet. I could smell the lemon cleaner I had used in the kitchen the night before. I took the tape measure from the junk drawer. The wall at the end of the hallway was 35 inches wide. I measured it twice. Then I checked my phone. 37. I assumed I had made a mistake that morning. I had been tired. I probably held the tape at an angle. The bookcase would not fit, so I forgot about it. For several days, nothing happened. I worked. I came home. I reheated food in the microwave and watched television until I felt sleepy. Above me, my neighbor walked from room to room in heavy socks. Water moved through the pipes whenever someone took a shower. The building made the usual evening sounds. Doors closing, the elevator bell, a delivery driver speaking into the intercom. Somewhere below, a child practiced the same short piece on a piano. These sounds were comforting. They reminded me that the walls were thin and other people were close. The hallway remained empty. Then, one night, I noticed the corner. It was the corner where the end wall met the bedroom wall. There was nothing special about it. No crack, no stain, no shadow that should not have been there. It simply seemed sharper than I remembered. The angle looked too narrow. I stood in the bedroom doorway and stared at it for a while. The lamp in the living room was on behind me. Its warm light reached partway down the hall, but not all the way. The corner remained dark. I turned on the hallway light. It looked normal again. I went to bed. At some point during the night, I woke to the sound of footsteps. They were slow and soft. At first, I thought they came from the apartment above mine. I could hear each step through the ceiling. A faint pressure moved from the living room toward my bedroom. Then the sound changed. It was no longer above me. It was in the hallway. One step. A pause. Another step. I lay still and listened. The bedroom door was open about 6 inches. Through the gap I could see part of the hall. It was dark, except for the pale green glow of the smoke detector. The footsteps stopped outside my room. I waited for a shadow to cross the gap. Nothing did. After a minute, I reached for my phone. The screen showed 3018. I turned on the flashlight and checked the apartment. The front door was locked. The chain was in place. The closet was empty except for coats, shoes, and the vacuum cleaner. The hallway floor felt cold beneath my feet. Near the bedroom, I noticed a smell like damp cardboard. It was strongest beside the narrow corner. I touched the wall. The paint was dry, but the plaster underneath felt colder than the rest. I told myself there was a pipe behind it. In the morning, I asked the building manager if there had been any leaks. He said no. He was standing in the lobby with a ring of keys in one hand and a small plastic cup of coffee in the other. Behind him, rain tapped against the glass doors. I described the cold wall. He asked which wall I meant. The one at the end of my hallway, I said. Beside the bedroom. He looked toward the elevators. There shouldn't be a wall there, he said. I waited for him to explain. Instead, he took a sip of coffee. My apartment has a short hallway, I said. I know, but that side of the bedroom backs onto the stairwell. I thought about the layout. The emergency stairs were at the end of the building. I passed their metal door every day when I walked from the elevator to my apartment. They should have been somewhere beyond my bedroom. Still, the distances did not seem right. The manager said he would check the plans. He never called me. That evening, I measured the end wall again, 32 inches. I stood there, holding the tape. I did not feel frightened. Not exactly. I was tired from work and my feet hurt. The number felt more annoying than threatening, like an error on a bill. I measured the hallway from the front door to the bedroom. 21 feet. Then I measured the outside wall in the building corridor. From my front door to the stairwell door, it was a little under 18 feet. I repeated both measurements. Inside, 21. Outside, 18. I understood that this was impossible. I also understood that I had work in the morning. I put the tape measure back in the drawer. I made toast and scrambled eggs for dinner. While I ate, I watched a quiet program about people repairing old houses. At 3:18, the footsteps returned. They began near the front door. This time, I counted them. There were 9 steps. The first was distant. The last stopped just outside the bedroom. I kept my eyes closed. The apartment smelled faintly of damp cardboard. In the morning, there was a mark on the hallway carpet. It looked like the flat impression left by a heavy piece of furniture. A shallow line ran across the floor from one wall to the other. The line was about a foot closer to my bedroom than the corner had been the day before. Beyond it, the carpet appeared darker. I touched it with my fingertips. It was dry, but very cold. The fibers felt stiff, as if they had been pressed beneath something for years. My next-door neighbor was leaving when I went to work. His name was Daniel. He lived alone and often held the elevator for me. I asked whether he had heard footsteps during the night. He adjusted the strap of his laptop bag. From upstairs, in the hallway, he looked at my apartment door. Your hallway, or this one? The question bothered me. I asked what he meant. Daniel glanced toward the elevator. Then he lowered his voice. Sometimes I hear someone walking inside your place, he said. Late at night. I thought you had a roommate. I told him I lived alone. He gave a small nod. He looked embarrassed, as if he had mentioned something too personal. We rode down without speaking. On the train, I searched for building plans, shifting walls, and errors in apartment measurements. I found stories about uneven construction and hidden service spaces. I found explanations involving ventilation shafts and old renovations. Every explanation required more space. My problem involved less. At lunch, the building manager finally called. He said he had found an old floor plan. Your hallway should be 14 feet long, he said. I looked around the break room. Someone had left soup heating in the microwave. The air smelled of tomatoes and burned cheese. That can't be right. I know. What's behind the end wall? He was silent for several seconds. Nothing marked on the plan. A utility space? No. The stairwell? The stairwell is on the other side. I pressed my thumb against the edge of the table. What does nothing mean? It means the paper is blank there. Before hanging up, he asked whether I had put any new furniture in the hallway. I said no. He sounded relieved. That night, I closed my bedroom door. I wedged a folded towel beneath it because the cold air had begun to enter the room. Even with the heat running, I could feel it around my ankles. At 3001 I woke. The footsteps began. 1, 2, 3. They came slowly down the hall. By the 9th step, they should have reached the bedroom. They continued. 10, 11, 12. Each step was softer than the one before it, as if the person were walking away from me while still moving closer. At step 15, the sound stopped. The room was very quiet. Then something touched the other side of the bedroom door. It did not knock. It leaned against it. The wood gave a small, tired creak. The towel beneath the door pulled inward by half an inch. Cold air passed over my face. There was a smell beneath the damp cardboard now. It reminded me of stones at low tide. Salt, mineral water, and something old that had never been exposed to sunlight. I did not open the door. In the morning, the pressure was gone. The towel lay in the hallway. I packed a bag before work. I took clothes, my laptop, and the documents from the desk drawer. I planned to stay with my sister for a few nights. Before leaving, I measured the end wall. 24 inches. The corner was closer to my bedroom. There was no doubt now. The hallway was not growing longer. The space beyond the corner was moving forward. I could see the difference in the carpet. The area behind the shallow line had become dark and flat. It did not look dirty. It looked old. I turned off the lights and locked the apartment. My sister lived across town with her husband and their young son. Their house was warm and crowded. Shoes were piled beside the door. A cartoon played in the living room. Something with garlic was cooking in the oven. I felt better there. After dinner, my sister asked why I had brought a bag. I told her there was a problem with the heating. She made up the couch for me with clean sheets. The fabric smelled like laundry detergent and the lavender soap she kept in the hall closet. I slept until 3018. Then I heard footsteps above me. My sister's house had only one floor. The steps moved slowly across the ceiling. 9 of them. They stopped directly overhead. I stared at the dark corner where the living room walls met. For several minutes, nothing changed. Then my phone lit up on the coffee table. The building's doorbell app had sent me a notification. Someone is at your door. I opened the camera. The image showed the corridor outside my apartment. The lights were on. My door was closed. Nobody was there. I watched for almost a minute. Then I noticed the camera angle was wrong. The doorbell was no longer facing the opposite wall. It was looking down a long, dim passage. The passage stretched far beyond the width of the building. Doors stood along both sides. They were all identical to mine. Each had the same welcome mat. Each had the same small scratch near the handle. At the far end, something moved across the floor. It was not a person. It was only a change in the darkness, like a shadow turning over in its sleep. The camera lost connection. In the morning, I returned to the building with the manager. Daniel was waiting outside my apartment. He looked exhausted. He said the footsteps had continued for most of the night. The manager unlocked my door. The apartment smelled cold and stale. The hallway light did not work. We used our phones. The end wall was gone. In its place was a narrow continuation of the hallway. The same white walls went forward into darkness. The same beige carpet covered the floor. There were no doors, vents, or light fixtures. The passage was too narrow for us to walk side by side. The manager raised his phone and pointed the light ahead. We could see perhaps 20 feet. Beyond that, the light seemed to fade without touching anything. On the carpet were small gray marks. Footprints. They began deep inside the passage and came toward us. There were 9 visible prints. The last one ended near my bedroom door. Daniel whispered that we should call someone. The manager asked who. None of us had an answer. I moved out that afternoon. I left the furniture, the dishes, and most of my clothes. I took only what fit in my sister's car. The building manager did not charge me for breaking the lease. He did not ask for the keys. A month later, I found another apartment. It is smaller and brighter. There is no hallway. The front door opens directly into the living room. From my bed, I can see the kitchen and part of the bathroom. I chose it for that reason. I have lived here for 6 weeks. Most nights are quiet. Sometimes the pipes knock when the heat turns on. Sometimes a neighbor comes home late and lets the door close too hard. These sounds are normal. I have stopped measuring the walls. I have also stopped checking the time when I wake. But 3 nights ago, I noticed a smell like damp cardboard near the corner of my bedroom. Yesterday, the delivery driver left my groceries there. I had asked him to leave them outside the front door. When I checked the doorbell recording, I saw him enter the apartment without unlocking it. He walked past the kitchen and continued toward the bedroom, carrying the bags. The video lasted 11 minutes. He never reached the corner. This morning, I found the groceries beside my bed. The milk was still cold. The bread was slightly damp. There was one extra item in the bag, a simple wooden ruler. Along its edge, someone had marked a series of measurements in pencil. 37 inches. 35. 32. 24. The last mark was made this morning. It is less than 1 inch from the end. I put the ruler in a drawer, but I can still smell the wet wood. The corner of my bedroom looks ordinary in daylight. The walls meet cleanly. The carpet is dry. There is nothing there except a small triangle of shadow. Still, every night that shadow reaches a little farther across the floor, and when the room becomes quiet enough, I can hear footsteps continuing beyond it. They are not coming toward me anymore. They are walking past me one by one into other rooms. Sometimes I hear a doorbell in the distance. Sometimes I hear water moving through pipes that are not connected to this building. and sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear someone calmly measuring the walls. Tonight, the sound is coming from the corner beside my bed. The tape slides out with a soft metallic whisper. It pauses. Then it clicks into place. A tired voice reads the number aloud. It is my voice, but it is standing much farther inside the room than I am. The washer that never finished. I started doing my laundry after midnight because the machines were usually free. There were 6 washers and 6 dryers in the basement of my building. During the day, every machine was taken. People left baskets on the folding tables to claim their place. Wet towels sat in washers long after the cycle ended. Dryers stopped with 10 minutes left because someone had opened the door and forgotten to press start again. After midnight, the room was quiet. I could bring a book downstairs, choose any machine, and finish 2 loads without speaking to anyone. The basement laundry room was not unpleasant. It smelled of detergent, warm cotton, and the faint dampness that old concrete always seems to hold. The floor was painted grey. The walls were white cinder block. A fluorescent tube buzzed above the folding tables. There was a vending machine in one corner. It sold small boxes of detergent and dryer sheets. The bottom row had been empty for as long as I had lived there. I usually used washer 4. It was nothing special. It simply shook less than the others. I would load my clothes, add detergent, and tap my laundry card against the reader. The display would show 34 minutes. Then I would sit in a plastic chair and read while the glass door filled with soap and water. That routine was one of the quieter parts of my week. I liked the steady movement of the machine. Shirts and socks lifted slowly through the cloudy water, then slipped back down. The sound was low and even. It covered the pipes in the ceiling and the elevator cables moving behind the wall. The first strange thing happened on a Sunday night. I had brought down a load of dark clothes, jeans, t-shirts, socks, and the sweatshirt I wore around the apartment. Washer 4 had 12 minutes remaining when I went upstairs to make tea. I was gone for perhaps 8 minutes. When I returned, the machine had stopped. The display still showed 4 minutes, but the drum was motionless. The clothes rested at the bottom behind the glass. I pressed start. Nothing happened. I tapped my card again. The screen changed from 4 minutes to 1. Then the drum began turning. It moved very slowly. My clothes rose along the back of the drum. They held there for a moment, pressed flat against the metal. Then they fell. Something pale fell with them. I leaned closer. It looked like a white sock. I do not own white socks. The sock disappeared beneath my clothes. I waited for it to rise again, but it did not. When the machine finally unlocked, I searched through the load. There was no white sock inside. I assumed I had mistaken the inside of a shirt for something else. The clothes felt unusually cold. Even after the spin cycle, they were heavy with water. When I carried them to the dryer, drops ran through the basket and darkened the floor. The water had a faint mineral smell. It reminded me of wet coins. I dried the load and went upstairs. The next morning, I found a white sock on my bathroom floor. It was small, not a child's sock, but too small for me. The fabric was thin and worn almost smooth at the heel. I picked it up with 2 fingers. It was damp. I left it on top of the washing machine downstairs, where people placed lost clothing. By the end of the week, it was gone. I did not think about it again until the following Sunday. At 12:30, I carried my basket to the basement. The elevator was slow, so I took the stairs. The air became cooler with each floor. I could hear the ventilation system breathing through the metal grates. The laundry room light was already on. Washer 4 was running. Through the door, I could see dark clothing moving in grey water. I checked the display. 1 minute remaining. There was no basket nearby. No detergent on the table. No book, phone, or set of keys to show that someone was coming back. I used washer 3 instead. As I loaded it, washer 4 continued its slow cycle. 1 minute remained on the display. I sat down and opened my book. After 10 minutes, the machine still showed 1 minute. The drum turned with a soft, dragging sound. The clothes inside looked heavy. They moved together in one dark mass. I sent a message to the building's maintenance number. Washer 4 is stuck on 1 minute. A reply came a few minutes later. WE, check it tomorrow. I finished my laundry while washer 4 continued beside me. When I left, it was still running. In the morning, the machine was empty. A handwritten sign had been taped across the door. I'll off order. For the next 2 weeks, I used the other machines. Washer 4 remained unplugged. Its door was open and the dark rubber seal around the drum had been removed. Without it, the machine looked unfinished. A ring of metal teeth surrounded the opening. Then, one evening, the sign disappeared. The seal was back in place. The power cord had been plugged in. I asked the building manager if it had been repaired. He looked confused. There wasn't anything wrong with it, he said. I reminded him about my message. He searched his phone. There was no record of it. I found the conversation on mine and showed him. My message was still there. The maintenance reply had vanished. The manager rubbed his thumb across the screen as if that might bring it back. Just use a different washer, he said. That was reasonable advice. I followed it. The problem was that washer 4 began running by itself. It happened only at night. I could hear it from my apartment. I lived several floors above the basement, so I should not have been able to hear any of the machines. But a little after 1 in the morning, a low vibration would begin beneath the floor. It was not loud enough to keep me awake. It was more of a pressure than a sound. The water in the glass beside my bed would form small circles. The closet door would tremble against its frame. If I placed my hand on the wall, I could feel a slow turning motion deep inside it. Each time I went downstairs to check, each time washer 4 was running. 1 minute remaining. At first, it contained ordinary laundry. A grey sheet, a faded sweatshirt, a pair of work pants. Later, the clothes became harder to recognize. They were still normal things, towels, socks, shirts, pillowcases, but their colors had faded until they were almost identical, a dull gray that looked darker underwater. No one ever came to collect them. I asked my neighbors about it. The woman across the hall said she used a pickup service. The man upstairs said he had not been in the basement for months. A family at the end of the corridor owned a small washing machine that connected to their sink. Nobody claimed the grey clothes. One night, I took a photograph through the washer door. The camera had trouble focusing on the glass. I held the phone close and waited for the clothes to rise. In the picture, the drum was empty. I lowered the phone. The grey clothing was still turning behind the glass. I took another photograph. Again, the drum appeared empty. There was only dark water and a pale circle of metal at the back. I recorded a video. On the screen, the washer door seemed to open onto a much deeper space. The round drum extended farther than the machine itself. Its metal sides narrowed into the distance like a tunnel. The end was too far away for the phone's light to reach. I stopped recording. When I played the video again, it showed only an empty washer. There was no tunnel. The next morning, I found a grey t-shirt in my laundry basket. It was my size. The tag had been cut out. Across the chest was a faint rectangular patch, as if a printed design had been washed away over many years. The shirt smelled of detergent and wet coins. I left it in the basement. The following day, it was folded on my bed. I put it in the trash. That night, washer 4 started at 1:13. The vibration moved through the apartment in slow waves. I stayed in bed, even. After half an hour, my phone lit up. The building's laundry app had sent a notification. Your cycle is complete. I had never connected the app to washer 4. A second notification appeared. 1 EDM remaining. I opened the app. It showed a simple map of the laundry room. 12 machines were arranged in 2 rows. There should have been 12. Now there was a 13th machine at the end of the row. Its icon was black. There was no number beneath it. I closed the app and went downstairs. The basement corridor smelled warmer than usual. The air was thick with fabric softener and damp concrete. Somewhere beyond the walls, water moved through a wide pipe. The laundry room door stood open. All 6 washers were running. Their displays showed 1 minute. All 6 dryers were turning as well, though I could see no lights inside them. The room was filled with a deep, layered hum. The machines did not shake. They stood perfectly still while their drums turned. Washer 4 contained my bedding. I recognized the blue-fitted sheet first. Then the pillowcase with a small bleach mark near one corner. Those things were on my bed when I left the apartment. I had slept on them less than an hour earlier. I stood in front of the machine and watched. The blue sheet turned through the water. It looked older with each rotation. The fabric became pale, then almost white. Threads loosened along the edge. My pillowcase rose against the glass. For a moment I could see the shape of a head pressed into the wet fabric from the other side. It was not a face. It was only the hollow where a face would have rested. The cloth slipped back beneath the water. I pressed the stop button. The machine continued. I pulled the power cord from the wall. The display stayed on. 1 minute. I left the basement. When I returned to my apartment, the bed was bare. The mattress felt cold and slightly damp. A round mark darkened its center, about the size of a dinner plate. I slept on the couch. The next day, I called the building manager. He went downstairs with me. Washer 4 was empty and unplugged. The other machines were silent. My bedding was gone. I showed him the laundry app. The 13th icon had disappeared. He listened without interrupting while I explained everything. When I finished, he sat on the edge of the folding table. He looked tired. Then he asked a question I had not expected. Have you checked the lint trap? Washer 4 was not a dryer. It had no lint trap. I told him that. He nodded. I know. He walked to the far corner of the room, behind the last dryer. There was a narrow metal panel set into the wall near the floor. I had always assumed it covered a pipe or electrical connection. The manager opened it with a key. Behind the panel was a square compartment filled with grey lint. He reached inside and pulled out a thick layer. Threads and hair were tangled through it. I saw blue fibers from my sheet, black cotton from my work shirts, a strand of red yarn from a sweater I had owned years ago. There was far too much lint for one person's laundry. It filled the space beyond the panel. The manager aimed his flashlight inside. The compartment did not appear to end. Grey lint covered the floor and walls. It continued past the reach of the light in soft, uneven layers. Deep inside, something was turning. Not a body. Not a machine I could see. Only a slow, circular movement in the fibers, as if the lint were being pulled around the inside of a very large drum. The manager closed the panel. He told me not to use the basement again. I moved out before the end of the month. My new building has a laundry room on the 2nd floor. It has large windows and bright lights. The machines are new. They send a pleasant chime when a cycle ends. For a while, I used the laundromat instead. Then I became tired of carrying my clothes across town. Last Sunday, I tried the new laundry room. I chose a washer near the window. I checked the empty drum before loading it. I even ran my hand along the rubber seal. There was nothing inside. The cycle lasted 38 minutes. I sat near the window and watched traffic move through the rain. The room smelled of clean towels and lavender detergent. Somewhere nearby, a dryer tumbled a pair of shoes with a slow, uneven rhythm. When my washer stopped, the display showed 0. I opened the door. My clothes were clean and warm. There was one extra item inside. The same white sock. It looked smaller now. I took it upstairs and placed it on the table. I am not sure why. Throwing it away had not helped before. That night, I woke to the sound of a washing machine. The noise came from my closet, a low rush of water, a slow turn, fabric sliding against metal. I did not open the door. In the morning, my clothes were still hanging where I had left them. But they were damp. The sleeves and pant legs all pointed toward the back corner of the closet. The white sock was no longer on the table. It lay there instead, pressed flat against the wall. Beside it was another sock, then another. They formed a neat line that disappeared behind my hanging coats. My laundry app says 1 minute remains. It has said that for 3 days. This morning, a new message appeared beneath the timer. It did not say my clothes were ready. It said the load was almost full. And now, when I stand near the closet, I can smell warm cotton and wet coins. The wall behind my clothes feels thin. Something vast is turning on the other side, very slowly. With each rotation, the closet becomes a little deeper. And each time it turns, one more thing in my apartment comes back damp. The mirror was looking somewhere else. The first thing I noticed was that my bathroom mirror stayed fogged longer than it should. It was not an expensive mirror. It was a plain rectangle fixed above the sink with 4 metal clips. The silver backing had darkened around the edges, and there was a small scratch near the lower right corner. I had lived with it for 3 years. Every morning I took a shower before work. The bathroom filled with warm mist. Water ticked against the plastic curtain, and the exhaust fan made its tired grinding sound above the door. When I finished, I wiped a circle in the mirror with my hand. That circle gave me enough space to shave. The rest of the glass usually cleared within 10 minutes. One morning, it did not. I showered, shaved, brushed my teeth, and got dressed. When I returned to collect my phone from the sink, the mirror was still completely white. The room itself was no longer steamy. The towels felt cool. The tile beneath my socks was dry. Only the mirror remained covered in fog. In the center was the circle I had wiped. The circle looked darker than usual. It did not show my face clearly. It showed the bathroom door behind me and the narrow strip of wall beside it. I moved to the left. My reflection moved with me. The dark circle did not. It stayed centered on the door. I rubbed the glass with a towel. The fog came away with a faint squeak. The mirror looked normal again. I left for work. My commute involved 1 bus and a short train ride. I spent most of it looking at my phone or watching people through the dark window. That morning, rain ran across the glass in thin silver lines. I forgot about the mirror before I reached the office. The next few days were ordinary. I answered emails. I bought groceries. I spoke to my sister on the phone. My neighbor Olivia asked if I had received a package for her. Somewhere upstairs, someone assembled furniture late into the evening. I could hear screws rolling across the floor. The mirror stayed clear. Then I noticed the corner. My bathroom was small. The sink stood beside the toilet. The shower occupied the far end. There was a laundry hamper in the corner between the shower and the wall. In the mirror, that corner looked darker. Not much darker. It was the sort of thing I might have blamed on the light. The ceiling fixture was old, and one of its bulbs had begun to flicker. Still, the darkness in the corner seemed unusually solid. I turned around. There was nothing there except the hamper and a towel hanging over its edge. I looked back at the mirror. The towel was visible. The hamper was visible. Behind them was a thin vertical space that did not exist when I faced the corner directly. It was perhaps an inch wide. It looked like a gap between the walls. I leaned closer to the glass. The gap was black. Not shadowed, black. When the ceiling light flickered, everything in the reflection changed brightness except that narrow line. I moved the hamper to the other side of the room. The gap remained. That evening, I replaced the light bulbs. For a week, I avoided looking directly at the corner in the mirror. This was easier than it sounds. Most people do not study their whole reflection. They look at their teeth, hair, or the spot they are shaving. A mirror becomes part of a routine. You use only the section you need. I kept my eyes on my own face. The strange gap remained at the edge of my vision. It grew slowly. After several days, it was wide enough to resemble a doorway seen from the side. I never saw what was beyond it. The angle was wrong. The mirror showed only darkness and the pale edge of a wall that my bathroom did not have. I tried taking a photograph. On my phone, the reflection looked normal. The corner was closed. The hamper rested against two solid walls. I took a video. The gap did not appear. While I watched the phone screen, however, my reflection in the real mirror turned its eyes toward the corner. I remained facing forward. The movement was small. My reflected eyes shifted to the right. Then they returned to me. I lowered the phone. My reflection copied me perfectly. I was tired. I had been sleeping badly for several weeks, though not because of the mirror. Work had become busy, and the upstairs furniture projects seemed to have no end. Lack of sleep can make ordinary things feel slightly misplaced. I knew that. I also knew what I had seen. The next morning, I covered the mirror with a bath towel. I used 2 pieces of tape to hold it in place. The towel was dark blue and thick enough that I could not see the glass through it. Getting ready without a mirror was inconvenient but possible. I shaved by touch. I combed my hair in the hallway using my phone's front camera. For several days, the bathroom felt easier to enter. Then the towel began to smell damp. I had not showered with it hanging there. I removed it each morning and replaced it after the room dried. The fabric still felt wet, not warm from steam. Cold and heavy, as if it had been left outside in rain. When I took it down, a dark rectangle had formed on the wall beneath the mirror. The paint was damp around the edges. The mirror itself was dry. My reflection looked tired. There were shadows beneath its eyes. Its hair was untidy. A small cut marked its chin where I had nicked myself shaving. Everything was correct. Then I saw that it was breathing differently. My chest rose slowly. The reflection's chest did not move. I held my breath. After several seconds, the reflection inhaled. Its shoulders lifted. It let the breath out through its nose. A small patch of mist appeared on the glass in front of its mouth. The mist was on the other side. I touched it. The surface beneath my fingertips was cool and dry. My reflection looked toward the dark corner again. This time, it did not look back. I left the bathroom. For the rest of the morning, I could see it from the living room. The bathroom door was open, and the mirror caught a narrow slice of daylight. My reflection remained at the sink. I was too far away to see its face clearly. I could only see the outline of my shoulders and the back of the reflected bathroom. It stood there for nearly an hour. Then it leaned slightly toward the glass, as if listening. I closed the bathroom door. That afternoon, I called my sister. I did not tell her about the reflection. I said I was thinking of replacing the bathroom mirror, and asked whether she remembered where she had bought hers. She laughed. "You always hated that mirror," she said. I told her I had never mentioned it before. "You did," she replied. "When you moved in." I asked what I had said. There was a pause while she tried to remember. "You said it made the bathroom look too deep." I had no memory of that conversation. My sister suggested a home improvement store and sent me a link. I ordered a new mirror that evening. The delivery arrived 2 days later. The driver called from downstairs. I went to meet him because the package was large. He stood in the lobby holding a flat cardboard box. When he saw me, he looked confused. "I thought you were upstairs," he said. I asked what he meant. Someone opened the door. He pointed toward the intercom panel. "Your camera came on. I saw you. My building did not have video intercoms. There was only a speaker and a button that released the front door." I signed for the package. The cardboard felt cold against my arms. The driver left without looking back at the building. Olivia held the elevator for me. She noticed the box and asked whether I was redecorating. "Just replacing a mirror," I said. She looked at the shipping label. "They sent it to the wrong apartment." I checked the label. My name was printed correctly, but the apartment number ended in a digit I did not recognize. Our building had no apartment with that number. Someone had crossed it out and written mine underneath. The handwriting looked like mine. I carried the package upstairs. The old mirror was easy to remove. I loosened the 4 clips and lifted it from the wall. It was heavier than I expected. The glass was cold enough to make my fingers ache. Behind it, the wall was clean and dry. There was no mold, wiring, or opening, only 4 small holes where the clips had been installed. I placed the mirror face down on the bathroom floor. The back was covered with brown paper. A faded manufacturer's label was fixed near the center. Someone had written on the paper in pencil. I thought it might be an installer's note. It said KEEE, this side toward the room. I read the sentence several times. There was no reason to write that on the back of a mirror. Every mirror has one side facing the room. I carried it into the living room and leaned it against the wall. Then I opened the new package. Inside was another plain rectangular mirror. It was the same size as the old one. It had the same darkening around the edges. It had the same scratch in the lower right corner. When I turned it over, the brown paper backing carried the same pencil message. The letters were slightly fresher. I returned it to the box. For several days, there was no mirror in the bathroom. I expected the room to feel safer. Instead, it felt incomplete. The empty wall above the sink seemed pale and exposed. I kept glancing at it while brushing my teeth. My eyes expected a face and found nothing. The corner beside the shower looked ordinary. The gap was gone. But the room smelled different. There was a faint scent of cold stone and wet fabric. It became stronger whenever I stood at the sink. The exhaust fan began pulling air into the room even when it was switched off. The shower curtain moved slowly toward the empty wall. One evening I heard water running while I was sitting in the living room. The sound came from the bathroom sink. When I opened the door, the faucet was dry. The sound continued. It came from inside the wall where the mirror had been. A steady, gentle stream. I pressed my ear against the paint. The wall felt cold. Beyond it, water fell into a basin. Then I heard a toothbrush moving back and forth, slowly, patiently. I put the old mirror back. I did not know what else to do. The moment the glass touched the wall, the sound stopped. I tightened the clips. My reflection stood at the sink. It was wearing the shirt I had worn the day before. I was wearing a gray sweatshirt. The reflection looked healthier than I did. Its face was rested. The cut on its chin had healed. It glanced at the corner. The gap was now wide enough to reveal part of another bathroom. I could see a second sink beyond the dark opening. Then another mirror. In that mirror was another reflected bathroom. Its corner contained another narrow opening. The sequence continued until the reflections became too small to see. My reflection raised one finger to its lips. I did not copy it. After that, we developed a routine. I stopped covering the mirror. When I entered the bathroom and found my reflection already there, I waited by the door. It usually needed only a few minutes. It would brush its teeth, wash its face, or stand with both hands resting on the sink. Sometimes it looked exhausted. Sometimes it seemed calm. When it finished, it stepped out of view. Then I approached the mirror and my ordinary reflection returned. I did not tell anyone. The arrangement felt easier than fighting it. The dark gap grew wider, but it never opened into my actual bathroom. It existed only in the glass. Occasionally, I saw movement in one of the distant reflected rooms. Nothing clear, only a towel settling or a shower curtain bending inward. My reflection always noticed first. It would stop what it was doing and watch the corner. Then it would leave. Last week, the gap disappeared. There was no gradual change. I entered the bathroom one morning and found a normal mirror. My reflection copied me exactly. The corner behind me was closed. The second sink was gone. The rooms beyond it were gone. My reflection breathed when I breathed. For the first time in months, everything was ordinary. That should have been a relief. It was not. My reflection has not looked toward the corner since. It keeps its eyes on me. Even when I turn away, I can feel it waiting. Yesterday, I found the laundry hamper moved several inches from the wall. Behind it, the paint was clean and unmarked. Still, there was enough space for someone to stand there. Tonight, I entered the bathroom and found my reflection waiting at the sink. It was not using my side anymore. It stood a little to the left, leaving an empty place beside itself. I stayed at the door. The reflection looked at that empty place. Then it looked at me. It gave a small, tired nod. I understood. I stepped forward and took my usual place at the sink. The space beside me remained empty. In the mirror, it did not. I cannot see what is standing there. I can only see how much room my reflection is making for it. So I have decided to leave the mirror where it is. I keep the light low. I keep the bathroom door open. I wait when the reflection needs the room first. This arrangement has worked so far. But when I pass the bathroom at night, I sometimes see two empty places at the sink. My reflection stands in front of one. The other is reserved for me. The light across the courtyard. I first noticed the window because someone had left the lamp on. My apartment faced a narrow courtyard. The building across from mine was close enough that I could see individual raindrops sliding down its windows. Most of the residents kept their blinds closed. The window directly opposite my living room was different. It had no blinds. A floor lamp stood in the far corner. It gave off a soft yellow light. Beneath it was an armchair with a folded blanket over one side. The room looked comfortable. I assumed an older person lived there, someone who stayed home in the evenings and forgot to turn off the lamp before going to bed. For the first few months I did not pay much attention to it. I worked in an office during the day. My commute took about 40 minutes. By the time I got home, the courtyard was usually dark. I would take off my shoes, hang my coat beside the door, and sit on the couch with whatever food I had picked up on the way home. The lamp across the courtyard was almost always on. Its light was warm and steady. In a strange way, I found it reassuring. It meant someone else was awake. The buildings around the courtyard made ordinary sounds. Water moved through pipes, doors closed. Someone dragged a dining chair across a floor. On weekends, music played softly from an apartment below mine. The window across from me was silent. Of course, windows are always silent. Still, I began to think of that room as the quiet one. The first unusual thing was the blanket. I had a blue wool blanket folded over the back of my couch. My sister gave it to me when I moved in. One corner was frayed where it had caught on a nail. One evening, I looked across the courtyard and saw a blue blanket on the armchair. The color was the same as mine. That did not seem important. Blue blankets are common. Then I saw the frayed corner. It hung from the same side. I stood at my window with my dinner cooling in my hand. The distance between the buildings was not large, but the glass was dirty. Rain had left pale tracks across it. I could not be certain of a small detail like that. I took a photograph with my phone and enlarged it. The image became grainy. The room across the courtyard looked darker in the photograph. I could see the lamp and chair, but the blanket appeared grey. The frayed corner was lost in shadow. I put my phone away. The next morning, I left the blanket on the couch instead of folding it. When I returned from work, the blanket across the courtyard was also spread out. It lay over the armchair and partly across the floor. Mine was in the same position. I remember standing very still beside the window. The apartment behind me smelled of wet wool and the paper bag from my dinner. My coat dripped onto the mat near the door. Across the courtyard, nothing moved. I closed the curtains. The next morning, I opened them again. The other blanket was neatly folded. Mine was still on the couch. That should have made me feel better. Instead, it bothered me more. I began noticing other similarities. There was a narrow bookshelf beside the lamp. I had a shelf in the same place. A small plant sat on its second level. Mine held a plant that had been slowly losing leaves since winter. There was a pale square on the wall above the chair. It might have been a framed picture. I had a framed print above my couch. The rooms were not perfect copies. They only shared enough details to make comparison unavoidable. I asked my neighbor, Helen, whether she knew who lived across the courtyard. We were waiting for the elevator when I asked. She held a grocery bag against her hip. The smell of oranges came from the top. She glanced toward my apartment door. Which window? The one directly across from mine. Helen thought for a moment. That building isn't apartments, is it? I said I believed it was. She shrugged. I never look out that side. The elevator arrived. The conversation ended there. That night, the armchair across the courtyard was gone. In its place stood a couch. It looked like mine. The cushions had the same slight depression in the center. A dark mark ran along one arm where I'd spilled coffee months earlier. I touched the stain on my own couch. The fabric felt rough and cool. The stain across the courtyard was on the opposite arm, as it would be in a reflection, but the window was not a mirror. I could see depth inside the room. I could see the side of the bookshelf and the shadow beneath the furniture. When rain crossed the courtyard, drops struck the far window instead of mine. I turned off every light in my apartment. The other room remained lit. I stood in darkness and watched. After a minute, its lamp switched off. There was no person near it. The room did not become completely dark. A thin grey light remained at the window, like weak daylight before sunrise. In that greyness, I could still see the couch. Something had changed. The cushions were no longer facing me. The couch had been turned around. It faced deeper into the room, toward a part of the apartment I could not see. I closed the curtains again. I slept badly. The radiator clicked beside my bed. Wind pressed gently against the window. Each time I woke, I had the feeling that someone had entered the living room. Nobody had. The front door was locked. The chain was in place. In the morning, I found the curtains open by several inches. I assumed I had not closed them properly. I pulled them shut before leaving for work. When I came home, they were open again. The gap was exactly wide enough to see the opposite window. A delivery box sat in the other room. It was placed near the couch. That afternoon, I had received a notification saying a package was waiting downstairs. I had not collected it yet. I took the elevator to the lobby. The package rested beside the mailboxes. My name was printed on the label. The box across the courtyard had the same size and shape. I carried mine upstairs. Instead of opening it, I placed it on the floor near my couch. The package in the other room moved. There was no hand, no visible person. It simply slid a few inches across the carpet. Then it stopped in the same position as mine. I stepped back from the window. My phone rang. It was the delivery driver. He apologized for calling so late. He said he had left my package in the lobby, but his app still showed it as undelivered. I told him I had collected it. There was a pause. "Which building are you in?" he asked. I gave him the number. He repeated it. Then he said, "That isn't where the pin was." I asked where the app had sent him. He said it had directed him to the other side of the courtyard. The call ended a few seconds later. The signal broke into soft static before the line went dead. I did not open the package that night. In the morning, the box was empty. The tape had not been cut. The cardboard was still sealed. It felt almost weightless when I lifted it. Across the courtyard, the other package was open. Something pale lay on the couch beside it. I could not identify the object. It looked soft and folded. I left for work early. On my lunch break, I searched for the building across from mine. The address appeared on maps, but the listing described it as a parking structure. The photographs showed a concrete building with open levels and metal railings. There were no apartments. There were no windows. I assumed the photographs were old. After work, I walked around the block to look at the building from the street. The entrance led to a parking garage. Cars filled the lower floors. Fluorescent lights shone across oil-stained concrete. The air smelled of exhaust and rainwater. I walked along the outside wall until I reached the courtyard side. There was no way into the courtyard from the ground level. A locked service gate blocked the passage. Through the bars, I could see the wall opposite my apartment. It was solid concrete. No windows. I counted the floors twice. The wall had ventilation grills and dark streaks from rain, but nothing made of glass. My apartment window faced a blank wall. I returned home before dark. From inside my living room, the other window was still there. The lamp was on. The couch faced me again. The pale object beside the open package was my pillow. I recognized the faded cover and the crease near the edge. I went to my bedroom. My pillow was missing. The sheet beneath it felt cool. There was a shallow depression where my head had rested the night before. I checked the apartment. Nothing else seemed disturbed. The locks were secure. The closets were empty. The windows opened only a few inches and had not been forced. I called my sister. I told her that objects were disappearing from my apartment. I did not mention the other window. She asked whether I had been sleeping enough. Her voice was gentle and careful. I said I was tired. She offered to stay on the phone while I checked the rooms again. As we spoke, I looked across the courtyard. A phone lay on the other couch. Its screen glowed. My sister's voice came from my own phone and, very faintly, from somewhere across the glass. The two voices were not synchronized. The distant one came first. Only by half a second. It said each word before I heard it against my ear. I ended the call. The phone across the courtyard went dark. Over the next week, more of my apartment appeared in the other room. My coat hung beside its door. My shoes rested beneath its couch. A stack of mail appeared on its table. Nothing disappeared from my apartment except the pillow. The objects simply existed in both places. At least, that was what I believed. Then small differences began to appear. The coat across the courtyard was wet when mine was dry. Its mail had yellowed edges. The plant on its shelf had no leaves. The shoes beneath its couch were covered in pale dust. The copied room looked older each day, not abandoned, used. The couch cushions carried deeper marks. The carpet became flat along a path from the window to the unseen part of the room. Someone was living there. I never saw them. I only saw the space their body left behind. One evening, the couch cushion lowered slowly, as if someone had sat down. The lamp dimmed. A faint oval appeared on the window. It looked like the mark left by a forehead resting against cold glass. The mark was directly opposite my face. I stepped away. The impression remained. Then a second mark appeared beside it. Something else had leaned against the window. There was still nothing visible behind the glass. I stopped opening the curtains. I pushed the couch against them so they could not move. For 3 days, I kept the living room dark. The apartment felt smaller without the window. The air became stale. The radiator seemed too warm. I slept with the bedroom door closed and left the television playing at a low volume. On the 4th morning, sunlight reached beneath the curtains. Real sunlight. I moved the couch and looked outside. The opposite window was gone. A blank concrete wall faced my apartment. There was no lamp, no room, no reflection of my furniture, only stained grey concrete wet from rain. The abnormality had disappeared, completely. I felt relieved for several hours. Then I noticed that the courtyard was wider. The opposite wall was much farther away than it had been. The rain no longer struck the glass with the same sharp sound. The traffic below sounded faint and distant. I opened the window and looked down. There was no courtyard beneath me. There was only darkness between the buildings. Not shadow, distance. A depth that continued beyond what I could see. I closed the window and called Helen. She came over carrying the same grocery bag I remembered from the elevator. The oranges inside had gone soft. I asked her to look through my window. She stood beside the curtains. "What am I supposed to see?" she asked. "The wall." She looked at me. Then she looked ahead again. "There's no window here." Her voice was calm. She reached out. Her hand touched the glass. She pulled it back immediately, as if surprised by the cold. "I should go," she said. Before leaving, she asked which apartment I lived in. She'd been my neighbor for 2 years. That afternoon, I went outside and crossed the street. I looked up at my building. I found Helen's window. I found the windows above and below hers. Where my apartment should have been, there was a blank section of brick. No frame. No glass. No sign that a window had ever existed. I stood there until the light began to fade. Then, in the center of the brick wall, a floor lamp switched on. Its warm yellow light revealed my couch, my bookshelf, my blue blanket. Behind them was my living room. I could see the window from the outside now. I could see myself standing on the street below. But inside that room, another version of me was already home. It sat on the couch with its back to the glass. It was holding the pillow that disappeared from my bed. The room looked quiet and comfortable. The lamp was warm. For a moment, I almost felt relieved to see someone there. Then the person on the couch slowly raised one hand. It did not wave to me. It pointed toward the dark corner behind my curtains. I looked back up at my apartment. The window had vanished again. The wall was solid brick. I returned to the building and climbed the stairs. My key still opened my door. Everything inside was where I had left it. The couch, the blanket, the unopened mail, the damp coat beside the entrance. The window is still here from the inside, but it no longer looks across the courtyard. It looks into my living room from somewhere else. Most of the time, the glass shows only darkness. Sometimes I see the floor lamp. Sometimes I see the back of the couch. Tonight, I can see someone sitting there. I know now why I never saw the person in the other room. They were always facing inward. They were looking at the apartment, not out of it. The window across the courtyard was never copying my home. It was showing me which side of the glass I lived on. There was one box, too many in my storage unit. I rented a storage unit because my apartment had only one closet. The unit was in the basement of my building. It was not a private room. It was a narrow cage made of wire mesh, one of 20 arranged along a concrete corridor. I kept ordinary things there. A suitcase, a standing fan, 2 boxes of books, holiday decorations, an old desk chair with one loose wheel. the heavy coat I wore only when the weather became cold enough. I visited the unit perhaps once a month. The basement always smelled the same: dust, concrete, and the dry paper scent of cardboard. The pipes overhead were wrapped in grey insulation. When someone used water upstairs, I could hear it moving through them in a low rush. The light near my unit took a few seconds to warm up. It would blink twice, buzz softly, then settle into a flat, white glow. I found the extra box while looking for my coat. It was behind the holiday decorations. The box was small and clean, brown cardboard. Clear packing tape, no shipping label. Someone had written "Hall, Close Zet" across the top with a black marker. The handwriting looked like mine. I assumed I had forgotten packing it. That seemed possible. I had moved into the building during a stressful month. I had packed quickly, using boxes from grocery stores and old deliveries. Some had remained closed ever since. I carried the box into the corridor and opened it. Inside was a grey umbrella. I had owned one exactly like it. I lost it on the train the previous winter. Beneath the umbrella was a green scarf. I remembered buying it, but I did not remember getting rid of it. There was also a key ring. It held 2 ordinary silver keys and a small plastic tag with no writing on it. Neither key fit my apartment. I sat on the concrete floor with the box between my knees. The air felt cooler near the ground. Dust gathered along the seams in my jeans. I tried to remember packing the items. Nothing came back. I took the umbrella and scarf upstairs. I left the keys in the box. The umbrella worked. It had the same bent rib I remembered. There was even a pale stain on the handle from a bottle of hand sanitizer that had leaked in my bag. It should have been on the train. Instead, it had been sealed inside my storage unit. I told myself someone had found it and returned it. That explanation required them to know where I lived, enter the locked basement, open my padlock, and recognize my handwriting. Still, it was an explanation. For several days, nothing else happened. I went to work. I took the train. I ate lunch at my desk while reading the news. In the evenings, I watched television or spoke to my sister on the phone. The umbrella stood beside my front door. Each time I passed it, I smelled rain. Not fresh rain. The stale mineral smell of wet pavement after the water has dried. The next weekend, I returned to the storage unit. The hall closet box was still there. Beside it was another box. This one was labeled DESK, draw. I unlocked the cage and pulled it forward. The tape made a dry ripping sound when I opened it. Inside were phone chargers, dead batteries, paper clips, receipts, and several pens. The kind of things that collect in a drawer without anyone deciding to keep them. I recognized most of it. There was a restaurant receipt from a dinner with my sister. A transit card I had replaced years earlier, a birthday candle shaped like the number 3. At the bottom was a card in a pale blue envelope. My name was written on the front. Inside, someone had written, "For our first quiet year, thank you for making room for me." The card was signed Mara. I did not know anyone named Mara. The handwriting was narrow and slightly tilted. It looked familiar, but I could not place it. I photographed the card and sent the picture to my sister. She replied a few minutes later. "WHO's Mara," I said I was trying to find out. My sister called immediately. She asked whether I was dating someone. I told her no. Then she asked whether Mara might be someone from work or school. I said I did not remember her. My sister was quiet for a moment. "You've never mentioned that name," she said. I brought the card upstairs and put it on my coffee table. The apartment felt different with it there, not changed, only observed. The next morning I noticed a faint ring on the table beside the card. It looked like the mark left by the bottom of a mug. I always used a coaster. There were 2 rings. One was older and almost invisible. The storage boxes continued to appear. They did not arrive on any schedule. Sometimes a week passed. Sometimes I found 2 new boxes during the same visit. My padlock was never damaged. The basement access log showed only my own entry card. The wire mesh around the unit remained firmly attached to the concrete. The labels were always in my handwriting. Bathroom cabinet, coat pockets. Under the bed. Each box contained ordinary pieces of a life I did not remember. A toothbrush still sealed in plastic. A nearly empty bottle of hand lotion. A paperback with sentences underlined in pencil. A pair of small house shoes with worn heels. A grocery list written on the back of an envelope. Milk. Bread. Apples. Coffee. Then at the bottom, the cereal he likes. I used to buy 2 kinds of cereal. I remembered seeing the boxes in my cupboard, one beside the other. One was sweet, the other was plain. I could not remember who ate the plain kind. After reading the list, I went to the store. My hand reached for the plain cereal before I thought about it. I stood in the aisle holding the box. The air smelled of floor cleaner and bread from the bakery section. A cart rolled past behind me with one squeaking wheel. I put the cereal back. At home, there was already a box of it in the cupboard. It was half empty. I stopped bringing the storage boxes upstairs. I began opening them in the basement and leaving everything where I found it. That made the unit crowded. The cardboard walls formed narrow paths between my belongings. Some boxes were stacked above my shoulders. Others filled spaces that should not have held anything. I could still see the wire mesh behind them, but it seemed farther away. The labels became more specific. MAR's nightstand. MRA's side of the closet. Things from the couch. The nightstand box contained reading glasses, tissues, and a small bottle of sleep medication. The label on the bottle had been peeled away. The closet box held folded sweaters. They smelled faintly of lavender detergent and someone's skin. The couch box contained loose change, a hair tie, 2 remote controls, and a single brass earring. I held the earring in my palm. A memory came to me. A woman was kneeling beside my couch, feeling beneath it with one hand. Her hair fell forward across her face. She was laughing because I had told her the couch ate everything. The memory was warm and detailed, then it was gone. I could no longer see her face. I could not remember the sound of the laugh. Only the feeling of having heard it many times. I called my sister again. I asked whether I had ever lived with someone. She sounded concerned. "You've always lived alone." I asked if she was certain. "I helped you move in. Was there anyone else?" "No." "What about Mara?" She did not answer immediately. Then she said, "Who?" I reminded her about the card. My sister had no memory of the photograph I sent. The message was still on my phone. She could see her reply, but she did not remember writing it. That evening, I searched my apartment. I looked in drawers, beneath furniture, and behind the closet shelves. I found small things that did not belong to me. A long hair caught in the bathroom drain. A second indentation in the mattress. A tube of lip balm beneath the couch. A faint, clean rectangle on the wall beside my bed, where a framed photograph might once have hung. There were 2 small holes above the rectangle. The air there smelled like lavender detergent. I slept on the couch. The next morning, an unfamiliar phone connected to my wireless network. Its device name was Mara's phone. The connection lasted 6 minutes. I searched the apartment again. I listened near the walls. I checked the hallway and the stairwell. There was no phone. The signal disappeared while I stood beside the bedroom closet. For a while, I considered calling the police. I imagined explaining the boxes, the card, and the wireless connection. None of it proved anyone had entered my apartment. It only proved that I had found things. I went back to the basement instead. A new box stood at the entrance to my unit. It was labeled Recordings. Inside was a small digital voice recorder. The battery still worked. There were 14 audio files. Most were ordinary. The sound of traffic, a television playing in another room, dishes being placed in a cabinet, 2 people discussing what to order for dinner. One voice was mine. The other belonged to a woman. Her voice was low and relaxed. She paused before finishing sentences, as if she liked to choose the exact word she wanted. I did not recognize her. Still, hearing her made my chest ache. In one recording, she said my name from across a room. I answered, "I'm here." She asked whether I had packed the winter clothes. I said I would do it later. She laughed. It was the laugh from my memory. I sat on the basement floor listening to the recording again and again. The fluorescent light buzzed above me. Cold from the concrete passed through my clothes. I began to remember small pieces. Mara reading on the couch, Mara leaving wet shoes near the door. Mara turning the plain cereal box so the label faced forward. Mara sleeping on the left side of the bed. The memories did not connect. They floated separately, without dates or endings. The final recording was only my voice. I sounded tired. "If you're listening to this," I said, "the boxes are almost full." There was a long pause. The room doesn't keep belongings. It keeps references. Anything that still points to a person gets packed away. Receipts, photographs, habits, other people's memories. My recorded voice took a slow breath. I don't know where the boxes go when they disappear. Another pause. Do not let Mara's boxes disappear. The file ended. I remained on the floor for a long time. Then I looked deeper into the unit. Behind the stacks was one more box. It was much larger than the others. The label said apartment. I removed the tape. Inside were smaller boxes arranged like rooms. The bedroom, the living room, the front closet, the bathroom. Each contained tiny familiar objects. A pillow, a blue envelope, a pair of house shoes, a plain cereal box. In the corner was a small cardboard figure lying on the left side of a paper bed. The space beside it was empty. I closed the box. I decided to bring everything upstairs. I did not have a plan. I only knew I could not leave the boxes in the basement. I went to get a cart from the lobby. I was gone for less than 10 minutes. When I returned, the storage unit was empty. Not only the new boxes. Everything was gone. My suitcase, my books, the fan, the old chair, the holiday decorations. Dust covered the concrete floor in an even grey layer. There were no clean spaces where boxes had stood. My padlock was gone. The wire door hung open. I checked my phone. The basement access app showed no storage unit assigned to me. My monthly payment history was gone. When I went upstairs, the umbrella had vanished from beside my door. The card was no longer on the coffee table. The second mug ring was gone. So was the plain cereal. The apartment smelled clean. There was no lavender near the bed. The mattress had one indentation. The wall was smooth where the picture had hung. The abnormality had ended. Completely. I began writing this account that evening because I was afraid I would forget. That was 4 days ago. I have read what I wrote several times. The first half feels familiar. The later pages do not. They mention a woman named Mara. I do not know anyone by that name. I cannot remember her voice. Although the description says I listened to it, there is no recorder. There are no boxes. There is no storage unit. I must have written this for a reason. Tonight, while getting ready for bed, I found myself leaving the left side untouched. I placed a glass of water on the empty nightstand. There is no nightstand there. Only a bare corner and 2 small holes in the wall. I stood looking at them for several minutes. Then I noticed a folded piece of cardboard leaning behind the bedroom door. It is an empty box. There is no label on it yet, but a black marker is resting on the floor beside my foot. And without understanding why, I already know whose name I am supposed to write. That's where the story ends. But you know how it is. Some things never really end. If it sent a chill down your spine, leave a like, and let someone else lose sleep too. Subscribe to the channel. I have many more stories, waiting to be told once you turn off the lights.